It applies to everything. So you can work on math and you find that it makes you better at legal reasoning. But model personality, it's a thick problem. You actually need a lot of human effort to think about what makes a good personality. How do I want this agent to act? And it's much more of a training process, like you would go through over many years of interacting with people. And now it's a very hard research problem to take that, specification for what the agent is and turn it into an actual appealing personality. But when you think about post-training, I think about people like Joanne Zhang at OpenAI or Amanda Askell at Anthropic, who really spend a lot of time crafting these model personalities, and they're not research practitioners.
Interesting.
Right? They're they're product managers, or they're people with a very deep understanding of human nature.
And are there more legs to the stool?
Well, okay. So I'm gonna say something potentially controversial, and I think actually there aren't. So I think if you go forward to 2030, or if you go forward to 2035, and you look back and you say, what were the fundamental concepts that you needed in order to create, more and more intelligence? Maybe that's AGI, maybe it's something different at that point. I think you're going to come up with the idea of language models with transformers, the idea of scaling the pre-training on those language models. So GPT-1 and GPT-2, basically. And then the idea of reasoning. And sort of woven throughout that, increasing more and more multimodal capabilities. And I think even in 2035, we're not going to see any new trends beyond those. And the reason I think this is, if you go back to 2020, so GPT-3 has just been trained. Imagine yourself sitting, we're at OpenAI, we haven't released this thing, but we know something apocalyptic has happened. And, Daru Amadai, Ilya Sutskever, Alec Radford, we're all sitting there in the room looking at this thing. And it was fairly obvious internally what the roadmap was. We knew that at this point, going from GPT-3 to GPT-4 by increasing pre-training was absolutely critical. We could see that we needed to increase multimodality, ultimately ending in a model that could use a computer. We were beginning to make experiments with test time compute. And in 2021, after the Anthropic people left, we really started developing the idea of reasoning at OpenAI. And it's funny, actually, if sometimes my friends ask me after Anthropic released computer use, they're like, did you see that coming? And I was like, well, we were working on that together back before they left. One of the people that did that project went to Anthropic, and the other one went to OpenAI and developed Operator. And it just took many years before, the multimodality had matured enough to get to that point that was obvious to us way back then. And so that's why I think, we're going to see from here on out, there's very important scaling. There's very important development and refinement of these ideas. That is extremely hard. It takes a lot of brain power. It's not going to be easy. But I think if we look back from 2035, we're not going to see anything new and fundamental. I think I'm right. I kind of hope I'm wrong. It would be a lot more fun if I'm wrong, but I think we'll have to see.
That's a hot take. I'm glad we have it on the record.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see in 2035. That's amazing. I'm curious about reasoning. It seems to me that OpenAI really leaned big behind this paradigm, probably before the others. And now everybody has reasoning models. What did you see in reasoning that caused you to lean so far in so quickly?
Well, effectively, it really was sort of this missing piece where with pre-training, the model has an intuitive sense of how to answer the question. But if I ask you to multiply two 5-digit numbers, this is something that's completely within your capability. But if I asked you to do it right now, you wouldn't be able to do it because it is just natural as a human capability to be able to think about something before you answer, to have a scratch pad, to be able to work through a problem. And that is something that, the initial models, even GPT-3 really didn't have. And so we began to see, glimmers of this publicly, things like, thinking step by step. And the idea of having a chain of thought that you could train, that the model would learn itself how to guide a chain of thought, not just be guided by cloning from publicly available data on how humans think. That was very powerful. And we knew that it would be more powerful than pre-training because, in fact, your thoughts are inside your head. They are not something that the model has access to. And so almost all the data that's out there is actually something that's just the final process, but you don't get to see that chain of thought. And so the model had to figure it out for itself. That's why reasoning mattered.
You alluded to earlier that we probably still have to uncover more things in reasoning. Do you think we have a good sense of what those things are today, or are we earlier in that R&D stage?
I think at this point with reasoning, if you are at the coalface, then you're seeing a lot of ideas and refinements of things that you can do. I think we've gone past the point where if you're on the outside, if you're not at a frontier lab, you're probably not seeing them anymore. And this is the same situation we saw where at one point academic labs could make huge amounts of progress. And then later, I would begin to see academic papers and I think, oh, they rediscovered this thing that we found a long time ago. And so, now the level of effort that's being put into this, I think is actually quite intense. So there are definitely things to be discovered, but they're not sort of simple ideas that you and I could talk about.
Cool. Switching gears a little bit, you tweeted recently about agents. I think a very, very interesting take, that agents will be incredibly powerful, but priced at the cost of compute due to competition. If that's the case, where do you see the opportunities in new startups and companies that are now building agents?
Yeah. So, I think the thing about agents is people think, well, I'm going to go develop an agent, and they look at how much the job is worth out there by a human. So, you want to develop an AI lawyer, and you think lawyers get paid a lot of money. So I'll be able to develop an AI lawyer, and the lawyers, I'm going to be able to charge huge amounts of money.
Tens of thousands of dollars a month.
Exactly, right? But the reason lawyers are expensive is because their time is scarce, because there's only so many people who have undergone that training. But by the time you've made an AI model out of it, well, now there's effectively an infinite number of lawyers. And so it's not scarce at all. And maybe you, with your AI lawyer startup, will be able to have a lead over other people. But it's the same frontier model underneath. And, some other startup can come in and compete that away. And so we should expect to see it priced at some opportunity cost over the cost of compute.
Interesting. Because you're changing, you now have a lot more supply, infinite supply of the highest capability intelligence in whatever domain you now have.
And on the one hand, there's a story where this is bad because startups can't make money. But this is actually the future we want, right? We want services that don't require people to be extremely cheap. You want everyone to have access to a lawyer. What you want to be expensive and scarce are things that are actually about personal relationships. So, maybe we won't be asking the human lawyers to write contracts because agents will be doing that for us, but we'll be asking them for sort of deep advice on, how legal challenges affect the, detailed challenges that I'm facing in my business. And I think that's the world we want to live in.
You think application companies will make any money selling agents, though? Like, where would you tell us to invest?
Yes and no. So just to back up for a second, people often talk about where does the value accrue in the stack, right? Is it at the model layer? Is it at the application layer? And if you look at the model layer, it's very competitive. Every company has a frontier model. Some of the frontier models can do things other frontier models can't, but by and large, they're all really very good. And if you're an enterprise, you can swap them out very easily. And beyond the frontier, all the models that are answering the bulk of the questions are distilled. They're very competitive. And so this isn't a very good business to be in when you consider the cost of training the models. So what's the point of training models in the first place? It's to give you an option. It's to give the frontier labs an option on the valuable places in the application layer that are coming up. But it allows her an opportunity to use the skills she already has. And so that's the place where I think proprietary data is really useful.
I want to switch gears a bit to coding. It feels like, software engineering has just gone through this fast takeoff moment. And, just judging from the pace of how quickly things are changing, I think there's at least a certain subset of the market that thinks, the super intelligence takeoff probability is a lot higher than than folks thought it was, just given how quickly coding has taken off. What's your view of what's happened in the coding space?
So I think, on the one hand, coding has taken off very quickly. On the other hand, way back in January 2020, as soon as we saw GPT-3, we launched a project